Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time of day it is where you are. We want to thank you for joining this week on this episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network, brought to you every week by our company, CVC Success Group. And your hosts on here are some of our coaching team members, myself, Cheryl Eisenhower, and Brandi Biswell. So each and every week we present this broadcast hopefully to share new ideas with you, things you can implement, ideas you can take into your own business. And this week is no different. Now, usually, most weeks, what we do is we actually try to find a guest and bring onto the broadcast. We've had a lot of really interesting people from outside the industry. Well, this week we're going to play it a little bit differently because this week the person we're going to interview is going to be Miss Brandi Biswell, because Brandi has come up with a new process that she is implementing into her recommendations for people to follow. And this is working because we've already field tested with some companies. So if you're listening to us now, stay tuned because it's going to be some real valuable information in order for you to take your people up to the next level. So Cheryl, what do you think about Brandi's interview we're getting ready to do with her?
I'm really interested in it. I don't know a lot about it. It's brand new. I know she's had it. I've heard about it when she was talking about it earlier, but have never seen it done. Have never saw how the results go. But I think what I've read of it is a super thing, and I'm looking forward to this.
That's it. So, Brandi, without going into details, if someone's tuned into us right now, why should they stick around for this episode?
Well, because this is going to teach them how they can implement a process for those employees that are maybe struggling in one area of their work to hopefully turn that around.
Okay, so stick around with us. We'll be right back after our little intro music, and we'll be right back. And we're going to put Brandi up in the big photo and the big screen, and we're going to interview her today. Okay, so I ended up in the big screen. I'm going to move Brandi over there. Now, Brandi's in the big photo here now. So now, this week, I want to welcome our guest here, Miss Brandi Biswell, because today she's going to be talking about something that is really remarkable. It is field tested. It didn't come from her. She has learned the way to implement this and put the processes together. So, Brandi, what in the world is the performance improvement plan that we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, so we call it a PIP for short. So if you've ever heard people, a lot of times you'll hear people refer to it as a PIP, but Performance Improvement Plan is what it stands for. And it's a different way to go about trying to work with your employees that are maybe having performance issues without being so penalizing. So for example, I will be the first one to admit that when I started in the industry, I was encouraging everyone to get on the point system. And that's what I had been used to in previous jobs. I had employees that came from previous jobs, and that's what they had. And at the time, that's what most people were using, and it worked. The problem is it's a new day, it's a new generation, things are evolving. Nobody wants to be on a scoreboard with points every time they do something wrong. The other problem is it gets into a lot of legal issues. For example, if you're using it for attendance, it's a no-fault system that you have to use in order to use it. So what that means is Joe can take off work because his child is in the hospital and get points. And then Timmy can just decide he doesn't want to come to work today and he's going to go snowboarding and get the same amount of points. And you have to treat those equally. And you also have to terminate when they get the same amount of points. So if 15 points is your cutoff and that's what they get terminated, then they're both getting terminated, even though Joe over here in the hospital with his kid, maybe our best employee, he's great performing. He just happened to have something happen in his life. On the opposite end of the spectrum, people who are using the point system don't always follow FMLA if they're over 50 employees or ADA if they're over 15. And there's certain rules where you can't penalize for the point system. But we find people that are using that system don't know that and they're not following that. So there's a lot of pitfalls with it. In addition to, it's just a penalizing system. And in today's world, we don't want to penalize people. We want to coach them to be better. And this is where the performance improvement plan comes in.
Okay, so I'm gonna start off here. So you've given some of the things that you're saying where the point system that, to be honest with you, we've seen other people that have heard your point system that you've shared with that have actually been preaching it. And now a lot of times I know that when you hear someone suggest the point system, I know that you cringe a little bit because it's a program that you used, you saw it, but now you're seeing the holes in the system. And this is from you learning more and more about this. So, have I pretty well pegged why Brandi is moving away or has moved away from the Brandi point system?
Yeah, it's outdated. There are still, don't get me wrong, there are still large corporations out there that are using it that haven't gotten up with the times, but it's an outdated system. And from an employee standpoint on the PIP, we want to work with the employee. And so it gives them a chance to prove that they are better than the performance we're seeing. From an employer side, if that employee is going to go file for unemployment, you have a much better chance of winning your side of the case with a PIP system than you do with a point system.
Okay. So, Cheryl, your turn. What question would you ask Brandi about the PIP system we're talking about here?
Yeah, I'm piggybacking off what you just said. I was reading that it made it much easier in the firing system when you had to do that. And you had all the documentation. You've given them what I'm assuming is the last chance if there's no improvement.
Exactly. So the thing with the PIP is it's very specific. It's very specific to whatever behaviors we've been seeing. And then it's very specific to what exactly occurrences were happening with that particular employee. And then we come up together with a plan going forward for improvement. So, for example, maybe you have an employee who has been in car accidents and just can't seem to drive correct. The employer might say, hey, we're going to put you through a defensive driving course. And you, in turn, need to do all of these things, have no accidents in the next 6 months, yada, yada, yada. Maybe it's an office manager who's struggling in their role. And it might be, as the employer, we're going to put you through a training class for office managers. And in return, you can't have these mistakes in this amount of time. And so you're setting I guess they would be SMART goals, honestly. You're setting very realistic, timed goals, and then you're meeting to discuss those. And everybody is on the same page that if these goals are not met by this time frame, and that's the time frame you established, then the relationship will terminate.
Okay. So, my turn next. So, in here, what I'm hearing you're saying, the first part of this is going to be a detail of where this person is not meeting the expectations of the employer. Is that the first part of this?
Correct.
Okay. Then the second part of this is where we spell out a plan of what the employee is going to do from their side to meet up with this criteria. What is their plan to do this? Am I correct?
Correct. And you, as the employer, want to say some things that they need, but then you also want to give them a chance to say how they're going to do that and offer their feedback as well.
Okay. Then we're going to say what the company is going to do to help the employee get to this level. Am I reading this properly?
Correct.
Okay. And then lastly, we're going to list the penalties. Now, here's the whole thing. Should someone list termination? Should they list what would be the, a lot of times, and you've heard me say this, people say, well, I'm going to write you up. And I say, okay, great. What does that mean? So are we spelling out in this what the potential penalties are that we are setting as the benchmarks that they have to attain?
Absolutely. And this is where, if you're comparing like a PIP with the point system, this is where like the point system is like the lazy man's way to take it, because there is a lot more documentation and a lot more detail and a lot more specifics in this. And where it's not black and white like the point system is where it's different for every situation. So one of the reasons I was passionate about discussing this is I've been working with clients on PIPs, different companies, and they get confused when it comes to, well, do I write in that they're going to be terminated? Do I write in that they're going to be demoted? It depends on the situation. And keep in mind that a PIP it's not like, we'll go back to Joe. It's not like Joe misses work one day and he's on a performance improvement plan. That's not how it works. Typically, there's going to be a verbal. In my company, it's 2 verbals, then a written All of that happens before a performance improvement plan because we're giving them a chance on their own to show us that they can be better. However, that also depends on the situation. And this is where I think clients get confused, is because I use the example, if that technician goes out and they soot a house because they didn't have a fan on top or they didn't have a tarp in front, I'm not going to give them a verbal for that and then wait till the second time they do it and give them a verbal for that. By the time we get to the PIP, we've lost our insurance for the company because we've made so many claims. So it's not black and white, but that's also the beauty of it, is we can curtail it to that specific case. Again, going back to Joe and Tim, where Tim's just taken off work to go snowboarding and calling in and we know it, and Joe's in the hospital with a kiddo. Those are two extremely different situations.
Okay. So Cheryl, what's your next question?
Okay, well, like Brandi usually does, I had to do my due diligence for this because, again, being the lack of knowledge. But I saw a bunch of templates out there.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the lazy man's way again, even if you have to change them. But the thing is, people, and I think you'll agree with me, this is more of an agreement situation than a question. The template's just something to look at and go by. I don't think it's a paste and copy thing, because it looked like it was extremely, you had to dig deep and make exact levels of where you were. Am I correct?
Absolutely correct. And again, that's where it goes back into the uniqueness of it and making it specific for that employee. You were right. If you put into Google performance improvement plan templates, you're probably going to get hundreds of different ones that are going to come up in all different ways. Now, I will tell you, every single client that I work with, I ask them to please get 2 books at the beginning of our working relationship. They're both by Paul Falcone, who is an excellent, excellent writer in the human resources world. One of them is 101 Difficult Conversations to Have with Employees, that covers everything from attendance to body odor to clipping your toenails at the desk. I mean, you name it, it's in there. And then the second one is 101 Sample Write-Ups for Documenting Employee Performance Problems. And what I like to do with this is, when I'm doing a PIP, I will look through it in the back and look at, okay, what is something that's sort of like what I'm handling. So for example, let me pick one: social media cyberbullying. We've never had that. Misconduct, fighting, and horseplay. There's, I mean, so many in here. Acts resulting in loss to the employer. Unwillingness to perform properly assigned work. And so what I like to do is I like to get in here and look at that and kind of see, okay, how did they write it up? What were some goals that they came up with? And then take that and use it as an example to make it unique for my employee.
So one more, Jerry. Do you see a lot of employers that will just look at this and say, this is way too much work, I'm not going to deal with it?
I do, or they want to take like my template and copy and paste it. I will say, one of the very first people that I ever worked with, I won't say his name on here, that had to do one though. I sent him some examples, and I mean, he did better than I've ever done on a PIP. Like when he sent it back for me to look at, I was so impressed. There's like 7 pages and it was amazing. But that's usually more rare.
Okay. So Brandi, if you would hold each of those books up long enough where people can see them.
Well, I can only hold one up because the other one I think is in my office manager's office. But the other one is by the exact same author, Paul Falcone, and you can get both these on Amazon. And the other one is 101 Difficult Conversations to Have with Employees. And this is 101 Sample Write-Ups for Documenting Employee Performance Problems. And what I like about this too is, when you get to that written warning, you can use examples out of here. And then when you get to the PIP, you can use examples out of here. But they are different. Now, again, this is something that we are making unique to the employee. So have there been times where I've given a written warning with a PIP because it was such an extreme circumstance? Absolutely.
Okay.
But again, from the employer side, if that person, goes to make a claim, you've had to terminate the relationship and they go to make a claim, at least in my state in Kansas, they want to see that you have done everything possible to give that employee every chance possible, including making modifications, providing them resources, working with them. And then if they can see that and you still had to terminate the relationship, your chances of winning that case are very high.
Right. So what this is not only something that can work to improve them, but if they don't improve, it's putting together what you need as far as the documentation to make a decision to terminate employee. You're pretty well in the clear when you make this decision. Am I correct in this?
Absolutely. And again, there's going to be, if an employee is, I don't know, we'll say drunk and high on the job, I'm not going to put them on a performance improvement plan. I'm going to terminate them. So there are circumstances when you're going to go straight to termination and you're not going to use this. But in the cases where there are performance issues, but you know that they're a good employee and you know that they have the potential, the performance improvement plan can make all the difference.
Okay. So did you wake up in the middle of the night? No, seriously, is this something that you woke up, or was it something that you learned from attending a seminar or a webinar, or was it just from reading a book that you picked up on this? How did you get focused into this particular thing? Because we know that HR is one of your big interests. So what lit your fire on this to start with?
Yeah, so this is like PIPs have been around for a long time. It's not like a new invention. And I love to read, I love to research, I love to listen to podcasts. I belong to different human resources organizations. And so before I ever did my first one, it was something that I kept hearing over and over again in all those different forums, people talking about. So at that point, I went in and did my research and thought, this is the way that we need to go for Flues Brothers.
Okay. Cheryl, your turn.
So you have quite a few clients. Jerry has quite a few, and you interlace on a lot of them. Are you pretty much taking this to all your clients and suggesting that they do this? Hopefully they have no one they need to fire. So I can see why you wouldn't, but are you presenting it to all of your clients?
Absolutely. And in some cases, it's a really easy conversation. And in other cases, the people are like, but Brandi, years ago, you told me to go on this point system. I've been using it. And so then we have to have a conversation, and I can usually point out holes in their point system to convince them to go with this. But yes, this is the way that I am wanting everybody to go in the organization. Now, that being said, I have seen this rolled out the wrong way in organizations. And what I mean by that is you can't just one day say, guess what, everybody? We're done with the point system. We're moving to progressive discipline. Part of that's going to be a performance improvement plan, and leave it at that, because they have no idea what that means. And that's going to scare the you-know-what out of them. And they're going to think it's just some other like slamming the hammer down. So you also have to explain to them what a PIP is and explain the benefits to them as an employee and how they also get feedback and get to give ideas in this process.
Right. And recently Brandi and I have some clients we both work on with a one-on-one basis. And Cheryl, sometimes you're involved with the hiring of that. So there's times that all three of us work with the same client. But I know that we recently had a client that we needed to implement this. And it was just like Brandi said, well, we've been using your point system, Brandi. Now you're telling me something new. But what we did was she put the client into where they were doing this. And then from that point, the client sent it out to me and sent it to her. And you're going to have to write a pimp for them dogs, Brandi. Okay? So anyway, at that point, he wrote his PIP, the PIP. And at that point, he sent it to both of us. And that's where I usually try to play the devil's advocate. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be the employee, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I wiggle around this thing? Looking at the words, where the words are. And a lot of times that's what we do. We actually share this because I may look at it slightly different than Brandi does. We don't always agree on that stuff. In fact, in that discussion, I can remember there were times that I was saying, hey, I'm reading this into it. And Brandi says, we're okay there. But that's the advantage of having outside counsel to help you get through to make these changes, because this is a pretty radical change. And I think what Cheryl said a while ago is, or you might have said it involves some work on the employer side, on the supervisor side. And that's what a lot of times where we fail, because we're not willing to put the effort in to actually make the changes with the company. So, Brandi, of that long dissertation I just gave, was there anything you would add to that? Are you in agreement with what I just said?
I'm 100% in agreement, and you jogged something in my mind too. You can't give a PIP, present it to somebody, and by the way, let me back up. You usually do want a witness in the room when you do it. It's nice to have another third party in there. You can't just give it and say, I expect you to do all of this, and then not give them a copy. So you need to have them sign your copy, but they need to have their own copy that they can look at, that they can refer to, that they can hold themselves accountable to.
And that's an amazing thing, because actually, believe it or not, I was watching a short study. This was a TikTok video, or it might have been on Facebook, and it was a Judge Judy episode. And what it was, there was an employer there, and the employer was suing the employee for damages, and presented this paperwork, and that the employment agreement had said. So now you're sitting there, and Judge Judy is saying, okay, you're not saying that on this employment agreement. You didn't put these things on here. So this document is not valid. I can't accept, and threw it out, which is realistically, that's what she's doing. She's basing her television judgments, even though they get funny at times, on real world situations. So that's part of the whole thing. What you're saying is we've got to give them a copy of this for their files. We can't just get them to sign it and put it in their files. But it takes me to the next question. What do you do if the employee balks at the PIP?
Perfect. I'm glad you asked that question. So you actually have a line at the end that says refusal to sign. And then you go ahead as the employer and sign it and jot a little note. I recently won a case where I had to terminate an employee for attendance, and they had come back from their complimentary days off and refused to sign the paperwork. And that actually played well into our favor when they tried to file for unemployment, and they lost their claim. But again, going back to Cheryl's point, we had documentation after documentation showing where we had tried to work with this individual, where we had had very long conversations saying, how can we help you? Why do you think you can't get to work on time? Blah, blah, blah. This individual actually said, I'm not going to leave my house any sooner to get to work. And I actually documented that, and that went in the paperwork. So where I find employers make mistakes is this, whatever instance happens, the employee's late, or they leave a tool at the job site, whatever the instance is, but the employer just puts it in the back of their mind and they don't put it on paper and document it. And then when it happens again, they don't remember the date that happened, the customer that happened with, and they don't have the proper documentation. And you can't write a PIP without having those examples of this happened, this happened, this happened, and this is why we're now at this point.
Got you. Cheryl, any other questions from your side?
The legalities. Have you seen a position or heard of any positions where the legality of certain statements came into play?
It's funny. I don't know if my husband will kill me for telling this or not, but he got a call from an ambulance chaser like an hour ago. They had found where there was an accident in the police records. He wasn't at fault. And they were calling, basically trying to convince him to go get medical treatment and seek medical treatment. And I looked at their website. They were basically probably going to say he had a traumatic brain injury and try to get money out of the insurance. So there are just shady people out there. There's different attorneys. There's different judges, and things vary by state. So I think anyone can find those legal loopholes or a problem with the verbiage in any case. But the more that you can document, even if it's maybe you need to bring a recorder and record it. Now, you don't let the employee record it, but you as the employer record it. Whatever you can do to have that in place and have a witness, which is why it's important to have that witness when you're giving that performance improvement plan. And you can have a spot on the performance improvement plan where the witness signs it.
Okay. So, Brandi, here's a test question for you. If I put down in my performance plan that if you do this again, you will be terminated, and I don't terminate, how worthless is my performance plans in the future going forward if we make a statement such as that of you will be terminated?
You have just told the employee that you are not serious, that this was all just a formality, and that they can pretty much get away with murder and do whatever they want because you're not going to hold them accountable and you're not going to enforce it. So if you put one of these in place, that's where, going back to what you said, Jerry, about, should I put they're going to be terminated or demoted? That's where you want to be careful about what you put, because whatever you put in there, you have to hold yourself to.
So what's a good phrase for somebody to say that leaves it open-ended to the employer to take a step of, if this happens again, we could terminate, we could demote, we could do any number of things. What's a good phrase to use to cover that?
You can even leave it more open-ended. If performance improvement is not seen in 6 months as referenced above, then further consequences will be implemented, and just leave it really open.
Okay, so further consequences, and not explaining in the paper what those consequences are. It's open-ended. These are the consequences that we will decide. We will be the judge. If it keeps going over, if we can't have it, then there's going to be further consequences. And then when that time comes open, you as the employer have warned them, and now you can take the action of the demotion or the termination that needs to be taken. Do I read you correctly?
Absolutely. I've pulled employees into my office to talk about them, I don't know, some silly mistake, and they're like, oh, I thought I was getting fired. And I'm like, I promise you, it will never be a surprise if I fire you. You will know it is coming before I fire you. You will have fair warning, because I will work with you. But it should never be a surprise that you're just all of a day, poof, one fired, unless, again, it's like that extreme circumstance where they come to work. I keep going back to drunk, because I had a friend yesterday that I had coffee with, and she works in the medical field, and she was telling me about a nurse that this happened to. So those are extreme circumstances, but 99% of the time they should know it's coming. And again, the PIP is there to serve as that like final warning of, hey, change has to happen in order for you to stay here and stay in this culture, in this environment.
Gotcha. Cheryl, anything else you would ask Brandi?
Actually, just one more thing. In your field testing, are you seeing improvements in the people? And you can also add, have you seen a termination because of it?
So 2 things are going to happen when you give the PIP. Either the employee, well, I'm going to say 3 things. Number 1, best case scenario, the employee is like, okay, this is serious. They're going to do everything on there and exceed it and completely turn around, and that's the end of the conversation. The opposite of the end is they're going to be like, screw this. I don't want this performance improvement plan, and I'm out of here. The middle is what we call that roller coaster employee. So they're going to be like, okay, I take this seriously. We're going to up. We're going to improve. And then 8 months down the road, when the coaching is no longer happening over the PIP, they start sliding back down.
No. Okay. Well, Brandi, you have made an excellent guest today. We appreciate you taking your time out to appear on our broadcast. So, at this point, we're going to turn you back into a member of the team now. Okay. So now you're not the special guest. You're just one of us out there. So before we hang up this week's episode, we want to share with you right now, we are putting together another group coaching effort out here to get the people together. We're going to be starting this new group. We'll be starting in June. We have some that are going to be moving from an existing group into this, but we do have some openings out there. So it's something you may want to think about. It's just like yesterday, we had a group call yesterday, and we went over some significant problems that people had, which is one side of this. But the other side was we shared some best practices. So it's not just about facing the challenges. It's about being able to intermingle with managers, with owners, with other people that share the same frustrations, the same type of chaos that you do. Also, if you're in our group coaching program, you're going to be able to participate in our monthly presentation calls. Just this past week, we had a best-selling author. His name was Doug Wing. His dad was Hal Wing. And what he told us was the story of Little Giant Ladder Company and how he faced the adversities. So Cheryl, how valuable do you think the call that we had with Doug Wednesday night was?
I think it was really good because it was all about the culture. His dad was, I can't remember the statement. Well, yes, I can because I can read it. I'm good. Um, he actually gave me a thing. Maybe it's not on this one. Whatever. Anyway, he's a people person, not particularly a business or a money person. He believes in helping the people, and I think I have found it, and I think it's good enough to read here if you will give me the longevity to do so. And it's in orange, so it's hard to read. I put oh, let's do this the correct way. I'm gonna have to play Brandi now. Sorry. If you concentrate on building a business and not the man, you will not achieve. But if you concentrate on building the man, now you achieve both. And I thought that out of everything that he said, I think that iterated with me more than anything else because everybody listening to this broadcast needs to know that our businesses are there because we have employees. And if we don't build them, then we have no business. So that's what I got out of it. That's what I heard other people getting out of it. And if anybody can listen to this gentleman's recitation of his father and not understand, number one, that he admired him, but also that he believed everything that his dad had done. I just think it changes people's lives. It really does. And if you've got somebody that you want to listen to, I suggest you get his book. It's got a lot of the stories. Jerry, you have yours in front.
Not in front of it. The book we're talking about here is called Giant Success. And like I said, I invited Doug in because Doug, to me, and the story of Howling is so significant because of number one, they weren't born with a silver spoon in their mouth. In fact, when you hear the story of how his dad traveled 300 days a year sleeping on ladders, it almost brings a tear to your eye, and had 7 kids at home, and the contributions that his mother made in order to do this. And then the chances he made in taking his product to market. It was like he explained to us about when his dad decided to do an infomercial. And when he did the infomercial, this was back when infomercials were hot. So his dad had to go out and get a mortgage on his farm for $1 million and lay it all on the line to put this infomercial together. But at the same time, by doing this, the production at Little Giant Ladders went from 400 ladders a day up to 7,000 ladders a day. And all of a sudden, they had ladders being sold in Bed Bath and Beyond. It was just all over, taking over the telecommunications. Now, if we take this past week, Brandi's on most of our Wednesday night calls, but because of something that was going on in her life, she couldn't attend that call on Wednesday night. But Brandi, the next morning, you got this whole recording where you could actually catch this when it interacted, because a lot of times you may have a family thing going on. So Brandi, from the aspect of group coaching and CBC and what we do, because this group is facilitated by the three of us, why should someone who owns a business or manage a business, why should they consider being a part of our group coaching program?
Well, as you know, we at CVC brought group coaching to the industry. This was something that the industry was lacking in. They had mixed groups that you had to travel to, but they didn't have group coaching. And so we introduced this to the industry over a year ago now, because we're just finishing up. We finished up a group. We're finishing up our second group that signed up for a year, and most are signing up again. So we didn't bring this in lightly. We did a lot of research before we brought it to the industry. We did our homework. And as far as I know, Jerry, and I could be wrong, someone can correct me if I am, I think we're the only people in the industry that offer group coaching that has this monthly call with an expert outside of the industry. And boy, have we had some phenomenal ones. I was sad to miss Wednesday night, but I've heard him before, and I have his book.
Yeah, you've heard him before. You've been able to interview him before, but it's also the advantages of being able to contact one of us or us as a group. Okay. It's like in the last few days, we've been working through a problem where one client in the group program, who also has a one-on-one client, and this GM are looking through health insurance issues. And Brandi and I have both worked with that today. Only yesterday, and I don't know if I shared this with the two of you, I actually had a 911 call with one of our group members yesterday about challenges going on in her business. And we talked about 30 to 45 minutes. And I think I shared some really good processes with her to help her eradicate the chaos and the frustration she's going through in her life and in her business. And that's what this is all about. I know that we are all three are heavily involved in getting coached ourselves. We're all three certified coaches, and we all carry different areas of expertise. When you contact us, hey, it's real close, it's real quick. If it's a Brandi specialty, I'm going to hook you up with Brandi. Okay. If it's a Cheryl specialty, we're going to hook you up with Cheryl. And same thing with me. If it's a Jerry specialty, they're going to do the same. But we feel like we've got a super program. We feel like it helps people immensely. You've got to attend the meetings. It is a commitment, but it can move you rapidly forward. It's just like working on all these different processes. So if it's something you're interested in, you're seeing our email addresses on the screen right now. Reach out to any one of us or reach out to us as a group, and feel free to ask any questions whatsoever you may have about our group coaching program. So Cheryl, anything you want to add before we kick out of this week's episode?
My thing, I just add one more about the group coaching. Take it to the group. Let them help you with it, because I can bet you over 2/3 of the people in that group have had the same problem.
That's it. Brandi, what about you? Anything you would add in before we kick out of this week?
Just, I mean, the third group, we have people that are kind of biting at the chomp for us to get it started. So it's starting real soon. So if it is something that you're interested, definitely send one of us or all three of us an email pretty quickly.
Right. And the other side of it is we don't take a competitor in unless the first person in approves it. So by coming in, we have had people that we could not allow in the group because there was a competitor in the group. And that's where we had people that wanted in our first group we formed and ended up being in the second group. But again, it's a good experience all the way around. And to be honest with you, I think everything has worked out good for all of those. So again, appreciate you joining this week here on the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. We try to do this show every week, and the whole purpose is to share with you processes that we feel will benefit you and go forward into the future. Reach out to us here. If we can help you at any time, you can see our addresses right in front of you. And with that, we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Chimney